Thank you for coming. We will have, we'll organize this that we ask every participant of the panel to present his opinion. Dennis will start with the introduction. We will have then, at the end of this discussion, you may have questions. Don't hesitate to ask them. And if we have then time, we'll have question and answers. We will listen to you as well. We will have to finish at 1 o'clock, so we have 1.5 hours. Thank you for your participation. So, Dennis, thanks.
Thank you, Heinz. Дякую, Хайнце. Можна, будь ласка, презентацію? Женя. Свій виступ.
In this presentation, I would like to dedicate this presentation to a population's well-being and landowners' well-being. And today in our panel, we will hear from different opinions, as we have representatives that will in more detail provide information about the benefits and risks that other stakeholders can see. And I would like to focus my presentation exactly on the landowners and the well-being of the rural population. Just to begin with, what is the land reform, and why do we keep talking about it in general? The experts are pretty familiar with that information, but I'm not sure that the general floor are just as aware. And this is why I'm going to start with some brief description, providing the information about the environment on which we're doing the discussion. As we know, in Ukraine, we got like 42 million owners of hectares of arable lands owned by someone, either by the state or private people, and there's a moratorium on sales of land. And this moratorium since 2001, and that concerns the whole 42.7 million hectares, except for the 1.7 million that could sell, like some orchards, kitchen gardens, which makes a small part of the land. In fact, you can sell it, but the rest is banned, and the only tool whereby land makes a transfer from one user to another, switching the ownership, is the lease tool, and there is about 16 million hectares that is rented out by segments owners, and that's the picture we have today. The question is that we're looking at on how the potential relief of that moratorium will potentially influence the well-being of the owners. And my presentation and the analysis that our project is doing to more clearly understand what could be expected by the owners. Why is that important, and why are we expecting that the lifting of the moratorium may provide a positive influence on the landowners, landlords? First of all, the channels of the impact on the well-being of the owners are multiple, and that is attainable via improving the lease or rental markets, the formation of sales market, and better access to loan or credit resources. And this is what we're basically going to analyze today, is on how lifting the moratorium may potentially influence the well-being of the landowners. So the question is, why could there be a positive effect, and why are we expecting the well-being to get better, and why one's entitlement to freely use and dispose of one's land is important? I know the examples of one or another market with one or another limitation, the existence of one or another restriction, and then the usage rates of one or another resource with restrictions is lower compared to those markets where it's not limited. And this is what is going on the land market. And the land market, I mean, in general, in common, and that's a lease market and that's sale market. And since this conference is academic in a certain way, this is why I will try to be more aligned the economic arguments to demonstrate the effect. On what can we see today? Today we have a market of lease, and I'm talking about the private land market, and we have practically absent sales and purchase market. During the moratorium times, we have a pretty interesting situation with the lease market supply, and it's not elastic economically speaking, because a great number of landowners that got their land after the privatization are pretty elderly, and they're physically incapable to cultivate their land on their own, but they can't do anything else to that land except for renting out. And that basically the supply of that land is not elastic economically speaking, so the people have to rent it out at any price proposed to them, because they got no other choice. And currently we have such a situation on this market, as far as we can see in the right chart, that the average prices that have taken shape on the market is about $50 per hectare, and as we keep seeing many years, about 16 million hectares is rented out by the landowners, and that basically forms on a year-to-year basis the population incomes levels of about $820 million, and that's the incomes revenues on rental of land that are now going to the population. At the same time, the farmers, the landowners, and the big owners make profit on the usage of that land, and that is the well-being that is taking shape from the part of the market producers, manufacturers. If we compare the land use in Ukraine compared to the other countries, then we will see that in many developed markets, the redistribution of this, the income generated by land rental is more or less equal between the owners and users and farmers. So the generated incomes or revenues are distributed in the proportion of 50-50 roughly. What we can see in Ukraine and what you can see as pursuant to the moratorium means that the majority of the generated revenues, over 86%, stays with the farmers, the less stays with the population. So that means the manufacturers, the growers have cutting edge, and they dictate the market situation. Is it good or bad? It's disputable. Now we can see that for the most part, land stays not with the owners, but with the land users. So growers, due to this kind of distribution of market forces, we are withholding and lowering the consumable income that might potentially come to the people and be usable for medical needs, healthcare needs, to improve one's living standards, livelihoods, and so on and so forth. In other words, the situation that we can see now on the land market includes, like we can see that landowners compared to the other markets, to the other countries, are short of receiving revenues enough to on the use of the resources. Once the land market is open, what could be expected? What economic mechanisms of actions are expected? According to the results of multiple surveys, we can see that about 5 to 8% of landowners are planning to sell their land, and that makes about 2 million hectares that will go up to the market. And that means that for these 2 million, the supply on the rental market, on the lease market, will go down. And economically speaking, that will that will cause a lowering and reduction of the rental on the lease market, which means that the rest of the owners on the 14 million hectares that will remain on the market will be able to get slightly higher revenues, which will make about 2 billion per year that the population will get. In other words, and that also will bring about a redistribution of those revenues among the growers and owners to the ratio of 62/37%, which is a more equal redistribution of revenues as expected on the lease market, which again means direct influence on the well-being of those owners that will remain on the rental market, and they will continue renting their land out, and that will be the direct benefit. And another concept, another thing expected is the result of the creation of the purchase and sales market. That's a new tool for redistribution. And again, as pursuant to the opening up of this market, the 2 million that are expected on the purchase and sale market, they are expected to generate additional incomes both for the growers and owners. So the owners will get 3 billion on top of that on the sales, while the growers will get an extra revenue on the level of 12 billion. On the capitalization of those revenues they will generate with the use of the 2 million hectares. So the total benefit that is expected on the more efficient land use, which is the improvement of the rental market and the purchase and sales market, is expected on the level of 130 billion. So in other words, if we summarize, lifting the moratorium on land sales will basically improve both the lease market and purchase and sale market, and the overall benefits on the opening up of this market is expected to stand at a level of $11 billion, given that the distribution of those benefits on the use of land resources is expected to be more evenly spread between the growers and owners. But it's worth mentioning that additional amount of money, that direct additional income for the population, for the owners, they will be able to better provide for the needs unmet. There's been a lot of talk during the other sections of our discussion on population's incomes improvement that is associated with the positive influences on one's health, quality of life, satisfaction, and some domestic needs, and so on and so forth. So the opening up of the land market is expected to spread that same influence and impact. And another more important impact on the launching of purchase and sales is that land will be usable as collateral to attract some credit resources to be used as working capital, and also for long-term investments. Speaking about the growers, the 1.5 million hectares available now and the 2 million hectares on top that will be also owned by the growers in case of the opening up of the market will generate an extra amount of 3+ billion of investments that will be usable for the small size and mid-sized enterprises and businesses that are really the owners of arable lands. And also it's expected to generate a better profit for better value of assets. Those owners that are not agricultural growers and own the rest 25 million hectares of land, that will also be better access to credit resources that people will be able to use, and also will allow them a relief setting up a new business, be it an ag business, not an ag business, that might also be money raised for short-term needs. And for that population, better access is also expected to credit resources. Now, potential scenarios of the unfolding of events. We don't know about the law to be approved, and when it will be approved, we can't say a thing. We had someone from the government, but hopefully when the members of parliament will cite their opinion, they will share something valuable. But what is going on now, there might come out in different options for the market of sales and purchase. That could be some limitations on areas, acreages that could be owned, that could be sold, and the question is, could all the players be present or not in this market? So depending on the limitations to be imposed, we will see different levels of demands on land on the purchase and sale market. That subsequently those limitations be introduced, then the effect of the market launch is expected to be way lower, not the 15 billion as we just mentioned, but if there's only half of the growers or a third of the growers, then subsequently both the prices and the anchors will be way less, way lower. And I would like to end my presentation on this, and thank you for your attention. And we can see that relieving those limitations is expected to be positive for the well-being of the grower, the ag population, and development of rural areas. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. If I may speak Russian. I'm not Russian. My wife is Ukrainian, and she listens to me when I speak Russian. Thank you. You're such good Ukrainians. It was very interesting, and I guess we got some interesting results. Vadym, Ivchenko, how would you respond to this status quo? Agriculture is a big business. Agriculture is a positive effect. How do you respond to that? Thank you.
Дякую, колега.
Thank you, colleague. You know, first of all, before starting the discussion, I would like to find out, is someone from the floor from a rural area? A, number B, is an ag university graduate, and C, doing actually agriculture. Raise your hands. Either or. 1/5. Okay, then I will base my presentation economically so that you will understand. Because agriculture is not only a business model issue, because there is a certain social aspect, and I would like us to understand. Tomorrow we're going to ballot the law on the land market. So the first problem that we're going to face, like any one of you will want to buy an X number of hectares, right? So with the rental rate $40 and with the normative monetary evaluation of 40,000, how will you get a credit from the bank? So you'll come to a bank and say, I want to buy a couple of hectares, 80,000. What are you going to do with the hectares? Because the bank doesn't need your land. Bank is a business. What are you going to do with your land? I will either rent it out or I will own it and grow it. You have a tractor? No. You got experience? No. Then you're going to rent it out. 80,000. You're going to give it back. You're going to be giving it back for 80 years. So show me a bank that will give you a credit for 80 years. Number two, percentage. So what percentage, what interest will the bank ask if the man will find this money? So you understand the interest rate, nothing to talk about. Number three, any bank, when farmers today take from a state-owned institution some working capital to replenish their stocks, and that's the state funds to support farmers. They give a collateral. So if state gives, it requires you got something else like a tractor, like a shopping stall. So give me a collateral. So for to take the 80,000, that makes 2 hectares. You've got to put out put up like 160,000. That's a whole apartment as a collateral. That's 2 hectares. If 200 hectares, that's 200 million. So you have to find in a village 20 million of a collateral. To show me a person, a volunteer, who may provide 20 million of collateral when just a house is $3,000 to $9,000. That's in a rural area. I'm not talking about somewhere closer to the city. So the financial constituent is utterly important for the opening of the market. And we understand the situation was going to be to the financial constituent, how the credits will be issued, on what interest, what criteria. So there will be an aggravating situation, a saddening situation. According to the Colonel's scheme, Verevsky's scheme, Verevsky has accumulated 700,000 hectares from 42, and I will make amends about 34, 36 within the total amount. And that makes 34 families, according to that pattern, will own the whole stocks, and they will form the parliament, the government, the president, the food safety of the country policy. Where are the others? So in other words, the system, as far as I have seen from the media, and Mr. Greg has bought another holding of 300,000 hectares, and now I just had an address, a claim from one of the areas, now in Moskovsky, one of the oligarchs requiring for a dotation, just grabbed and took over, were deprived of several hectares of farming areas. So they just the system actually will protect someone who wants to buy land. That's court ruling, that's registers, that's doctoring the signatures, and that's lame law enforcement, and not let alone actually as I start reading before citing data, I read first. And Dennis, back in 2015, together with the World Bank, was doing some analytics, and in that analysis says that, for example, only 66% of the land are within the land state cadastre, and 33 of them in the entitlement register, and another half have some taxation numbers. So you cannot compare. You cannot even compare the registered bank with just at least to pay taxes. That's according to the World Bank, and I'm not talking about the fact that only 21% of the registered and property entitlements will pay taxes. 11% have shown that 150% of lands registered. That was demonstrated. Another 75% of the rayons areas, less than 20%. And that's something that we have seen through the registers. Okay, the second constituent. That was the first one was the financial side of it. The second one is the price. Somebody said $16,000 per hectare. There's a farmer here, a grower. So I asked them, will they give $16,000 for their own land? How many ever they would have? The price of any land, of any soil, depends on what you potentially can grow there. If that's for real property, that's one price. If that's for granary, elevator, that's another. If that's for corn, that's another price. For wheat, that's yet another price because it's different. Corn now yields, and that's the public register of our great agro holdings, yields 800 euros, but they pay 40. It's an understandable situation. So even if we talk about the fact that everyone is going to plant corn, but nobody will not give more than 5 years, to 3 to 5 years, that's $2,000 minimum. What will the person get for the $2,000 haven't sold their plot? Just some fixing on the roof, some fixing on the benches and fence. That will not increase their income. They won't even be able to send a child for studies because you know that the prices of someone's son or daughter going up to Kiev for university, and the price, believe me, will be, once the market is formed, will be more than 2,000. And in Berlin, the situation with the soils is far worse, and they go out to the woods and they pick berries and they resell them to a berry factory for frozen food. I'm not talking about milk. I'm not talking about dairy cooperatives and how the egg people, the country people will hand it in. I'm not talking about lease. And also dairy cooperatives that potentially may form a party and price. So the country, the state are not doing anything for this, nothing, for them to get richer, for them to get wealthier. So a couple of days ago, when I was in Ternopil Oblast, we swam by some orchards and gardens and processing facilities and also a family-owned farm because I'm managing that direction area. And so I swam by a family. They have 6 cows and at home, and the revenue on the dairy products on milk is 24,000 per month. And what has the state given them? Nothing, not even the status of a grower. Without a status, like 4.5 million other people, without a reliable pension, and with this pension reform, they will also have that social benefit just to cover the utilities a little bit. But we are getting ready a system of transformation to attract as many people as possible to go out to an organized market of ag products who is ready to go into cooperation, form something. So we need to work on that as much as possible. So we're talking about the subsidies, distribution. So, and this year I'll tell you, if we got 1.5 billion for this program, we would get 120,000 family farms, 120,000 multiplied by family. And that will make like 600,000 only families, altogether greater families, engaged in agriculture. And if you add on top of that some seasonal hands, that will make millions. So officially engaged in agriculture, 460,000. And in 3 more years, we would be able to have built up something. Now access to land, they say we have no possibility to make feeds, to stock up on feeds. So how come we should get land? And they say to the territorial communities, aerial communities. I say yes, why not? First step.
Ні по понятним схемам. А потрібно роздавати тим, хто сформує сімейну ферму.
Given to those that family farm, number 2, that will manage the land right, and then in a few years, when they see that they're a good farmer, it will be possible to purchase it. In other words, privatize. So in that particular way, we just had people from the French embassy, and they were my personal guests, and asked them to work on the state cadastre. And they said the following: they have a structure called SAFR, ASSAFR, like our land cadastre, and they said that this structure makes their market and their rental market of land such that will meet everyone. The process of agriculture, you cannot just rent your land out, just out of nothing. Why? Because SAFR says that those departments have criteria. The first one that will rent my land will be, number 1, an organic grower, number 2, value-added products, number 3, livestock breeding, number 4, local, number 5, not at least 200 hectares. So any companies wanting to rent, they are supposed to fall and meet into those criteria, and then they will get a permit, and they will go out to the people and have a negotiation about a potential rental. And this is what they do. Like one department, there's more pressure on livestock breeding because we understand that in Vadym they won't do cereals like somewhere only in the north, not in the south, not in the south, not in the north. And now there are people that are short of rental. Because nobody wants to take anything from them. There could be a cluster here, there could be a cluster of cereals, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and that's the state regulator. If we go that way, now look, 51,900 in total of registered entities in agriculture. So do you know how many of them get subsidies? there was like a figure like that. They wanted to sell them to territorial communities. There's even a law. 1,159, 2%. 2% of them. The first 20 of the growers have taken 70%, and I can even name them by figures, but I monitor them completely. 39% I would have taken just one poultry farm, and another share, another one, a billion, and the year is not over yet, 1 billion, and another export on VAT. I'm just going to describe who has. It's just to describe to shed light on who has money and who's ready to go to the market. Everything should be done in parallel or sequentially by sequence. First of all, the land plots should be driven out of shade, because it's there where those shadow harvesting processes are going on, and they're short of paying taxes. That's the #1 draft law that we're gonna vote for. Number 2, there should be like a farmers bank or egg growers bank, so that you come there and you take some credit, and the state will lower the interest rates down to 3 to 5%. The third criteria, to who? Italy was providing it for the rental. If you rent it out for 5 to 7 years, you can buy this land, and that's normal. That will compel the people, force the people, prior to buying the land. At least you should show and demonstrate that you're going to do something. You're not sitting here in Kiev somewhere in a parlor and rent that out, because there will be the bandits, prosecutors, the judges, and someone else that will buy as growers, and they will sit in that hotel or luxurious apartment, and the people will work for them down in the village. And that's another option that should be actually developed, and where
Мільйонів гектарів вони вже не будуть мати такої родючості, як ми з вами звикли називати наші чорноземи. І закінчуючи таку річ, я скажу, що всьому свій час. Повірте, всі цивілізовані країни приходили до ринку землі. Всі. Але це потрібно робити таким чином, щоб ми не зробили швидко ту проблему, яку ми не зможемо виправити. Приватну власність ніхто не забере. І наостанок статистика. З 10,5 мільйонів державних земель 40% вже в приватній власності. Причому ми ловили сьогодні моменти, коли віддавали 400 атошникам в Київській області, а потім воно залишалося у 2 власників. Що це означає? Ми з вами розуміємо. 40% вже в приватній. Тобто тепер відніміть від 42 мільйонів, відніміть там 7 мільйонів, все інше в приватній власності. І під мораторієм, це я вам хочу сказати, тільки 24 мільйони гектарів. Тому що та земля, вона продається і покупається, вноситься в статутний капітал, вона називається особисте селянське господарство. Землі по підведенню, під особисте селянське господарство, під ОСГ. Вони вільно продаються і покупаються, і проблем нема. Тільки 24 під мораторієм. І коли вже ті землі роздерибанили, сьогодні приходять суди для того, щоб собі відхопити ці шмати. Давайте робити все паралельно. Ми за. Але я, підтримуючи державницьку позицію, бачу певні проблеми сьогодні, про які ми не говоримо і не хочемо навіть їх розпочинати, скажімо, втілювати, реалізовувати задля того, щоб колись в майбутньому ми повернулись дійсно до цього питання і говорили більш, скажімо, на позитивній ноті. Дякую.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the second member of parliament, and we are very grateful that that the land market is not only a land market, not only made of farmers, growers, but I'm sure that Mr. Stryzhak will answer to that question. That also includes a financial market, and it's important to us to understand all the issues, all the matters. It's very good that we have members of parliament in here, that the parliament are talking about that, and that's a key matter for Ukraine. So welcome, please, Mr. Pavla. Your opinion, please. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Pavlo Rezanenko, member of Parliament. I like the question in the beginning asked by my colleague, who has to do with agriculture, he was asking. I have my own reservations. I lived in a village up until 5 years old, and because my parents used to live there, and that the third generation actually. All the parents and my grandparents actually lived in a village, and I remember those times, and my childhood was there in the village. So it's good to have some reflections on that issue. And we have some experience, and it seems normal to us, though in most of the countries there's private property of land, and they don't know any other thing. But 16 years back, almost all land belonged to the state. A little bit of statistics. Ukraine's total acreage is 60 million hectares. 42 of them are ag lands, arable lands, but not all of them are state-owned. It's only about a quarter, which makes 10 million hectares. 28 million hectares is private property. However, it's under moratorium and it's shared. It's got land shares, and about 4 million other hectares are private property without limitations. So it's freely for sale and purchase. Just to remind you that every one of you has the right to get 2 hectares for free. In the course of privatization, you try it and you talk to the land cadastre and to the institution and all the implications. So the state-owned land, 10 million. So how does the state use it? It's either state enterprises growing something, or it is rented out, or it is either that or that, and it flows over, switches from state to private for million, without limitations. Every year, about 150,000 hectares are being privatized and become private without any limitations for purchase and sale. As to the 28 million, how come we got that? That was belonging to the collective farmers previously, and then in the 2000s, when the privatization was going on, then the workers, the hands and pensioners of those holdings, collective farmers, got their title on that land, and then in 1 year, 2, 3 years, we jumped into private property. Of course, that had certain implications, consequences that would have been in any circumstances, like the market changing the situation in the agricultural area. Moratorium was imposed. The conditions of the moratorium was changing all the time. And today we have a pretty tough moratorium with not allowing you to change some court rulings or exchange anything, and so on and so forth. So 7 million people became owners of those land shares. So in total, that was like 28 million. There was a good idea that, yes, there's a peasant, a farmer working, and they're supposed to be the owner, and they will work all right and good. And it was a mistake, in my opinion, because not all those 7 million wanted to work on land. Because in Soviet times, though we had no choice, we remember that up until the 50s, people in the Soviet Union didn't have passports like my parents did. So to go up to town, you had to join a university. So, of course, those 7 million people did not start cultivating the land, and with the moratorium, they haven't had even lesser opportunity, so they had nothing to do except for renting it out. And there are pretty bright figures, maybe unemotional, and my parents really inherited the land shares from their own parents, and they're owning them now. And there's no alternative, because in every village, if there's like someone who's a grower renting that land out, and that's 3%, or you're free to go. That's the condition. If they don't agree to sign an agreement for 3%, they won't cultivate the land in the middle of the field. There's no secret. All the agro holdings talk about that. They said we take it away and then goodbye. when we share like a sack of grains as a sign of generosity, if so, they come over to us. So that's the situation. 30,000 hryvnias is the rental size. So I think that will be an average of 1,200, even less so. But there are situations when there is one agricultural growing company having a monopoly or holding, and there are situations that someone else comes over and there starts a conflict, especially when the rental agreements expire, and when it comes to competition, that might skyrocket to $120. In Kyiv Oblast, I have Brovary and Barishevka constituencies. Half of them are rural areas, and that's 56 to 60 villages. And in certain situations, especially when there are foreign companies coming over there ready to pay the actual market price, and they will go up as a competition. And so was it 700 to 900 hryvnias or $120, $150 at a market price? In the competition-related situations, we can see the $150 is something that a rural citizen can get. Therefore, it's more about social issues and issues of justice. Let's revert the land back to them that was taken away, that had been taken away back in 1917, but it's not the right destination to whom to revert to, because otherwise they already perished in Siberia. 7.5 million farmers are not necessary to Ukraine, and about half of them have died already, about 20% of landowners, and a third of them, it seems, they don't have any heirs. So their land is getting back to state property, to be state property. So, let's not condemn the 15 years ago condition, and that was an option. So who has won, who have lost? And by all means, the landowners have lost from the economic point of view, and maybe from the point of view of their capacity implementation, some economic capacity implementation, like selling or renting out at a higher price and so on. So who will win? Therefore, and by all means, that was the growers, mid-size, little size, big size, because in the condition of rental monopoly, lease monopoly, they have redistributed the lease worth in their favor substantially. That's one factor, and they have a cutting edge over their colleagues, counterparts from the other countries. And yet another very important factor, where else in the world will you find a country within which to go start up a big agricultural business, you don't need a startup capital. And if you talk about the starting such a business with a land market, you will have to either buy land or take it on long lease or a credit for 20, 25 years. Very high operational risks in the agricultural business if you have taken a credit. So in the Ukrainian business, there are no such problems. You want to start up that business, and essentially you won't need a capital. All those big companies with hundreds of thousands of hectares, they started without a great capital, just gathering those land banks. Is there or is there not a land market? It is already there. And just to remind you, 4 million without any moratorium, buy and sell, up to 28 million on moratorium. You're free to buy a company that has agreements on rentals in one or another village. There's a price on the market per hectare, $200 to $400 for the corporate rights, and then you can recalculate it about $50 for the rental of this land. If that's a big company and the capital worth is like 10%, so you capitalize the $50, and that will make $500 plus the cost of just one-off rental to be paid with 200 to 400, so the holdings therefore are selling land at the price of $700 to $900 per hectare. When I talk to companies, let us say ag companies that were started in the West and have access to the capital, so what price are you ready to?
$200,000. Тому ми
they may pay, and we can judge about the efficiency or non-efficiency and of this market that seems to not exist, but really it does exist. And if you continue the moratorium, that will lead us nowhere. That will only bring about the enlargement of land banks and the duration of the agreements, and it was 15 years max. Several years ago now, many companies are trying to conclude agreements for 20, 25 years, and they try and use the opportunities of empty taxes. And a lot of land has already been contracted. And speaking about it going to the market is not fair because according to those agreements, they have a right of way for just purchasing the land. And as always, any limitations will lead to the fact of someone wanting to bypass those limitations. And when someone bypasses those limitations, what do they do? Therefore, they do corruption. And the most, and I tell you what, the most complaints not about law enforcement. The Ukrainian land cadastre is one of the most corrupt bodies, and you can easily deal with them if you're ready to resort to corruption and deal with the cadastre. The share owners refuse to pay money, and they refuse them their property, and that comes to the cadastre, and the cadastre is distributed 2 hectares per capita, being covered up by the ATO vets, and they will pay them $100 to $200 for the use of their right. And today this market exists, but as always, it is not efficient, and it only serves just a small number of people to redistribute the economic benefits. What do we do to that? Of course, in our society is not morally ready to sell lands to foreigners. I can't see no problem about that. There are limitations in many countries of Eastern Europe, and the concept that the government are ready for, and you should remember that up until July, they were actively working on a moratorium lifting reform, and you know that IMF and the World Bank are getting back to that issue. So within the reforms proposed, there won't be an option to sell to foreigners. There will be a limitation on acreage. There will be a limitation on price brackets. The bottom end of it, full transparency, price-related will be proposed, and that will cover the price and rental conditions, and everything should be as a minimum in an aggregated status on areas, on settlements, and the same concerns the rental. And these are the most important key points to the reform required by the government, and there will be the same limitations on the quantity of or acreages for an individual, for legal entities on the level of rayon, oblast in the country. We, of course, don't want a monopoly. So the question of the company's efficiency, doing like 500,000 hectares, and I was myself born in the countryside, but I'm not very much up on production itself, production proper, but the efficiency is also questionable. From what I have understood, efficient farms make clusters 10 to 15,000 hectares each. So if we talk about limitations and the fact that, yes, we need some sort of the safeguards on limitations. And the last thing to be said, I don't see an alternative to make a land market, to introduce a land market. Yes, of course, one may use political reservations. There are certain conflicts of interest between politicians, and they want to shift the blame towards anyone else, but that's the reality. That's the political culture. Someone tries to win a constituency, provisionally speaking, 6 million, 36 able-bodied citizens who are the constituents, and the rest who are the owners, not very much in know about that matter, but subconsciously, how come that happening? Foreigners will own our lands. They're proposing on television. Someone will just forestall everything, like the Hindus, the Chinese, the Arabs. They themselves don't know they want to forestall. And just to say that there is a substantial conflict of interest, of economic ones, because my constituency that resides in a village, and they're owners of the land, and they want the moratorium relieved by, they're not listened to. Like the person that on average owns 4 hectares in a Kiev Oblast, and they're not united, they cannot stand for their interests, while the holdings, the big companies with huge resources, and what I can see that over the last 4 years, they keep allocating those resources to policies like now there's an agro lobby in the parliament and representatives of big holdings and agro companies. And today, the largest parliament committee is not a budget committee, that's the agro-industrial committee, and you can see who is present there. Pretty respectable people I respect, but the status quo, we need to understand that has formed itself over the last 15 years, and that's used big business fund, and it will do so for 5 to 10 more years. It's just to emphasize that 1 year ago, the discussion on moratorium relief was like never with the ag business, but the consolation here that the dialogue that was started back in spring, it reached the summer on that reform, and that actually resulted in the fact that discussion was shifted from never to on what conditions, and I think that's important. We need dialogue, and I also understand that we need to go to compromises and take into account the interests of the farmers, because they are afraid that as the result of switching to one's full property, their business will be lost, their rights will be lost. But for that, we need a dialogue both here and in the government, in the parliament, and society. Thank you.
Дякую.
Thank you. So the next speech will be delivered by Mykola Stryzhak. It has been a pleasure to listen to you. And there are some additional questions in terms of what farms are more efficient, whether small or large landowners are more efficient. There are different opinions about that. And it was really interesting to hear the statement that you said that the market exists now. And this is a very solid issue, very solid statement. So, Mykola Stryzhak, the floor is yours. You're welcome. Could you please tell us more, what do you think about that? I'm the son of the farmer, and I have empathy for you. So I think that the agro holdings and small farms in Ukraine can develop. They have a potential to develop, and that's important that they develop. So it seems to me that the government and the parliament listen to you more than they used to a couple of years ago. And therefore your work gives some fruit. So what do you think of this aspect, of the future of the land market and of the financial aspects and the aspect of investment into the land market? Your view. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I may tell you that here we have only 1/5 of the audience who know where the village really is. And I'm sorry for those who were born in the village and say that they know what the village is. To live in the village and to have some rest in the village are two different things, absolutely different things. So, point number one. If I stayed at one table with the MPs and the representatives of the authorities, and I had to have a discussion with them, then for each of your arguments, I could give 10 counter arguments. and I could really prove that you're wrong. The first argument I would use is that a person has got the land, is the landowner, and the person needs to dispose of this land according to his or her constitutional rights. I'm a farmer, I'm an agronomist by profession, and therefore I would like to take my 10 hectares and to have poppy seeds, poppy grown there, and cannabis. But my desire contradicts to the interests of the society. That's simple, right? No. Well, it's exactly according to the law, which means that my desires, my wishes run counter to the wishes and interests of the society. I realize this and you realize this. But what about cannabis and poppy? Is it the only stumbling block in the development? No, I would say that this concerns a lot of other products as well. So those who are in favor of the land market or land sales are divided into two categories. Our friends from Europe are quite conscious about being mistaken, I would say. All of them, yes, all of them. They are unanimous in their mistakes because they are trying to impose our rules on their reality. And there are also our politicians who are hypocrites. They lie whatever they can, and you cannot convince and persuade them of anything. It's just impossible. And I will try to apply what I studied during my third year of studies. I will tell you what I was taught, and probably you will agree to what I say. So, thing number one, land issue and land reform are two different things. Land reform is a way of living and the way of arranging things in the village, while the land issue is just sales of land. And we are offered just one part. We will tie the reform, the classical reform by Petro Stolypin, who was a classical reformist in the whole world, but for our country. So what is the basis for his reform? The first thing was that the agriculture of the country is designed. Well, that was the thing which was not mentioned by any of the candidates for ministers. No candidates can give the answer to that, but they need to read Stolypin's theory, and the first task is the food self-security of the state. So everybody knows this, but for the decision makers in the field. Issue number two, creation of conditions for peasants, for them to fulfill item number one. That is again classical. And here the question comes, and what kind of a village would we like to see? With just in booths with outdated tools, or should we talk only on the purchase and sales of the village, and that should constitute the basis, and where should the people then go from the village? So, well, I'm naive enough, and I claim that we are striving for Europe, and we would like to build Europe in our villages. What about Europe? Do they have agro holdings? They don't. They have family farming. They have servicing cooperatives, and they function because that is a way of living in the villages, in rural areas. America in the 20s and the 30s of the previous century actually had this kind of disease of large agro holdings, and they no longer are willing to apply this approach. And therefore, we need to be clear about what kind of the village and what kind of the peasant we would like to see. We use the word concept. We place the goal, the main task, the main objective in terms of what village we would like to see. And those people who studied back in the Soviet period at the universities and institutes start to build up the strategy or the action plan. This is the way we're going to approach our goal attainment. This is again classical. And the third point is the tools, a set of tools we're going to use to get to this goal. This is access to technologies, this is access to funding, to sales market, storage, and so on and so forth. These are all the tools, a set of tools. And there is a special tool, which is land. That's the kind of means of production, as we say. A very special means, a very special type. And therefore, Ukrainians need to be careful in treating this means. Why? Because we just take the tools and they're trying to build something we don't know what. We have the concept of the basic model of arranging the agrarian sector. Do we have this model? No, we don't. Do we have any program? No. Do we have the agenda? No. So what are we going to build? What are we generally going to do with this? Let's get back to Petro Stolypin and his reform. So creation of the conditions, you remember that is point number 2, for the peasants to develop and for them to be able to buy land for their development. All the issues which have been covered here are about the sales of land, but when a peasant sells land, he's no longer a peasant in a way. And there is also one statement which is rather hypocritical, and people try to hide it, that people have the same rights, but they are not the same. Some people can successfully do their activity on 1 hectare, the others can do it with 10 hectares, and there are people who could do it well and manage quite well the large territories. So this means that currently, if we are destroying farming in itself from 43 to 33, this means that we have created conditions for destruction of SMEs in villages. But the deputies, the MPs, claim that they are fighting for the happiness of the people. They are trying to advocate the right of the people to sell the land. They have already set the tariffs, they have settled the issue of healthcare, education. So the only thing left is sales of the land and the right of an old lady in the village to sell her land. But let's get clear about that. Let's try to decide where then this old lady is going to live the final years of her life if she sells the land. And maybe it's not worth selling because one of the grandsons who is jobless in the city can get back. Probably he will get some education, get back to the village, create jobs there on this land. And this is already going to be the right to inheritance. We have 73,000 of farming farms. And we have 1,100,000 individual farmers. I'm one of the co-authors, and here in the room we have another co-author of the research, which has helped us to convince those who are mistaken and to convince the MPs that we really need to build up a new village with new conditions. What would we like to see there in those new villages? We would like those 1,100,000 individual farmers. We want them to have access to financial market and to sales market for their products and not for the land, and for their activity to really fully maintain proper and dignified living in the village. And it's wrong when on the richest lands of Europe there reside the poorest peasants. It means that something is wrong about our activity. We need to apply a purposeful approach. And sometimes we're looking at the researchers, and in particular at our MPs, who are trying to prove something and tell that only the sales of land will bring about the heaven and the Eden in Ukraine. So if I see them, I can tell you that there are 2 countries in the world where more is taken from the peasants than is given to them. This is New Zealand. There is a 0 indicator. Even in Russia, there is only 3%, right? And Ukraine is the only country with a negative indicator. 63 billion were last year taken away from the village, washed away from the village instead of being given to villages. The reason is that there is a lack of money, but another reason is that they think that there are some extra peasants in villages and you need to drive them out. In what way this could be done? Definitely, you don't provide living conditions for them and wages, and that will be okay. They will move. We suggested our strategy for the development of farming in Ukraine, which presupposes creation of added value in the rural areas, which provide us with the existence of free peasants. We would like to have Ukraine who would be hired employees or who would be free peasants. We should think it over. Large agri-holdings give jobs for whom? For hired employees, while we suggest creating the conditions for access to money and to the markets through cooperation for us to be able out of this 1,100,000 to take at least 100,000 in 3 years and to make them free peasants, so to make them reach this level. And they will create new jobs, and therefore the country will no longer be the raw materials appendix to their world civilization. We will have added value. We will have new jobs. We will have taxation in place, definitely, and these will be free people who would help with decentralization and who would create free communities capable of self-management, self-administration, because they have the money, they have wages to pay, they have inherited housing and jobs. That would be perfect. It means that we grow up the patriots of our land who would work further, because farmers used to be the best volunteers, and they currently are. So do we want to have Ukrainian patriots and volunteers and clear advocates of their native land, or do we need the people who got some certificates, property certificates in the urban areas, and these certificates finally went into the hands of other people. So now just 11 people have those property certificates. If we move along that way, it means that 11 people will buy the lands only, and we will again have not feudalism, but it will be kind of principality. And if we take Mr. Yanukovych, so we will have the kingdom. There will be only one Tsar, one king. So what kind of society do we want to have? Mykola, just 1 minute left. So on solving those issues, we are trying to say that the government has at least agreed to our arguments. And you know, the farmers used to be the first people who wanted the land movement to exist. And if this concept is implemented, there will create jobs, there will be funding, self-funding, there will be communities created, and then we will reach the level when we will move over to the democratic society, and we will build up Europe without moving anywhere. Polish farmers last year organized more than 1 million jobs for our operators, for our workers. So can't we do the same? Can't we arrange those jobs? We can, but no, not everybody is willing to. But thanks to our persistence and thanks to God, I think that we have been heard. We were not just talking, we were trying to close the roads and to do other things for them to hear, to listen to us. But anyway, all the forms of business have been somehow concentrated around the issue of land, and we are moving the way the France took. French people are trying to build up their villages, and in Paris they live just the citizens of Paris, and they are not Frenchmen. So this is their strategy. So I think that if we want Ukraine to exist, we must have farmers, and in this way we will arrange our future. And when we approach this issue in this way, so I think that there's 1,100,000 individual farmers, at least some of them will work on 1 hectare, but they will get 10 hectares, and these will be the newly created conditions for the people who are willing to live there and to work there in the rural areas. So we need to create the conditions for them to have this movement of land, and according to Stolypin, they must have the right and ability to buy the land and not to sell the land the way we are doing it at the moment. If we really reach that level, I think that the future of Ukraine is there. And in the future, on the best lands of Ukraine, there will live the richest and the most prosperous peasants of Europe, not 11 agro holdings. Thank you. As I've understood it from your words, Mr. Stolypin was still insisting on the sales of land. Well, you as hypocrites are trying to offer a market to us, but what we are suggesting is a civilized market, and these are two different things. Stolypin actually made a curriculum for the Soviet authorities, and the Soviet authorities just wanted to destroy them. And these people were rich people, prosperous people, who were helping even their horses to work. while you are trying to suggest that we have just 11 owners of large agri-holdings according to your formula, and you are not supporting the interests of old ladies in the villages. You're just supporting the interests of those 11 people. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to listen to you. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. In particular, I like the statement that if we have a village, we will have the future of Ukraine arranged. And he also mentioned that not all the people have equal rights, but not all the people are the same. Ukraine is Europe. That is your key statement. We have one more interesting speaker, the ombudsman. Please, could you tell us, Dmytro, something about the rights, human rights? Is it really important during the process of land reform in Ukraine to keep to human rights, and what issues we should solve? We should settle. Thank you for the opportunity provided to me to have a speech on this highly important issue. Definitely, the Ombudsman's office is faced on a daily basis with people's addresses relating to land disputes, to inactivity of local authorities, and the state land cadastre in terms of the enjoyment of their rights. And to give the answer to the question as far as whether it is topical to open up the land market, I support the previous speaker 100% because he has really described the situation we currently have in our villages. 26 years of independence have resulted in the land code adoption and the law on farming and the law on individual farmings. But the implementation of the laws by the state has not taken place. So, in fact, one cannot tell that there is no single copy. In some periods, there was support for the farms, for individual farms, but the state now has not created the conditions, the environment where efficient farms could be created, or individual farms or family farms could be created. Besides that, what are the impediments on our way to reform? We have not finished the decentralization reform yet. We have not created the local government system. And definitely, we also now reach the point that now we have the inventory of lands, and nobody knows the sizes of different farms. For example, yesterday, the ATO guys addressed Vasylkivska administration, and the administration provided them with the lands, but it appeared that this is the state-owned land which is located in the forest area. So what could they do with this land? And now we have a lot of land disputes in courts under consideration. And is our judicial system really ready for that? Do we have any specialized courts for settling land issues? I think that even now the presentation of the reform about the free land market has some problems because people talk about raiders attacks. They claim that somebody comes to them with guns in their hands and they impose some contracts on them. So definitely, until we have a stage-by-stage reform, nothing will be reached. And we need the roadmap, the action plan, and only after that the reform can be implemented. But we didn't do this. And that must be as follows, that one step is not fulfilled, we cannot come over to the next step. Thank you. We will have some 15 minutes more. And if you, these are not comments, but just questions. If you need to ask the question, just introduce yourself and tell whom your question is addressed to. Please, Olga Sidorenko, the floor is yours. Thank you. Olga Sidorenko from the Euro Expert Journal. The question is to everybody, and in particular to Mr. Strubenhoff, because he was the head of the Ukrainian-German agro-political dialogue for a long period of time, and they were also doing a lot of researches relating to the land issue, holding a lot of conferences where they talked it over how this experience could be, the European experience could be used in Ukraine. We have been trying to make this roadmap for 25 years already, and we have been trying to elaborate some new legislative acts, and we claim that there is a lack of legislation. But when is it going to be over? What do you think? What is the point of time where now our peasants will have a chance to really do something with that? You know, our peasants are not silly guys, and they will manage to dispose of land. So, when will you give them the right to really do this? Let's collect further questions. Yuri Hanushchak. Well, as you know, I'm responsible indirectly for the territorial administrative regime reform, and I'm interested from the point of view of just practical aspect. Who, out of the tiers of the level, I mean, what tier of the authority is the holder of this land veg? Definitely, this is community, then this is the second tier is sub-regional level. You mentioned the department, and the other one, the third one, is the state represented by the authorized bodies, state cadastre or something like this. So who will be the holder of this? Because, you know, it is, there must be some circulation, and there might be the final point, which is when the holder of this land issue needs to pass a decision. He is the decision maker. So this tier is highly important for us. This level is important for us to be able to move with our reform. So then the question is addressed to, well, we have MPs, and I think that Mr. Ivchenko knows more about this, knows the most. Good. Please give your answers, and we will still have a couple of more questions. Well, thank you. I will try to give the answer to the first and to the second questions just in brief. You know, today we are having a discussion, and we all realize that we need to move on. This is what your question is about, but if we take the initiatives of MPs and the government in the agrarian field, in particular in the land reform, so only one law has been adopted within 3 years. And we have a lot of problems with land. And if we move at this pace, I think that our moratorium will keep existence for a long period of time, because everyone understands that if we open the market in these conditions, that will mean destruction of Ukraine and Ukrainians. So what we need is not just a roadmap, because with the use of our partners, the World Bank, USAID, we could do with this roadmap. But we need the legislative support, and we need the implementation component. And only in those conditions we could keep on with the dialogue. But when now we don't have... if we analyze the majority of initiatives, the majority of them can be implemented now, but we don't have a chance to vote on them, and that is the problem. Why do we still keep the moratorium? That's because we don't have the practical voting on certain legislative acts regulating land relations. And if it keeps on like this, that will be the situation for a long period of time. Thank you, Yuri, by the way, for coming here, for your presence here. And answering your question, I'd like to say that definitely the main thing that the community must dispose of its land resource. But the main point is that they don't sell this land, they don't waste this land the way this is done by the state register. For example, they give it to students from Kharkiv in Lviv. So we need to find the landowner. And we need to give the land to the people who can really be good owners and who can manage those lands quite well. And this could be done on the basis of certain criteria, and we have taken the experience of France. So let's try to implement at least partially those criteria. For example, concerning local farmers. Why can local farmers not compete with holdings at the moment? Well, it's understandable in one way, but we need to provide the possibility for local people, for local residents to do this, because agro holdings is dealing with a lot of hectares in 17 regions of Ukraine, let's say, and the local owner will care much more about the land. You know, the owners of those holdings, they normally come to those territories by helicopters, and he just has a look at the results. And his functionality is the basic thing he's interested in. He's not interested in the roads in the village and the schools in the villages. That's why we need to give access to all that to locals. That's why we have suggested those draft legislative acts for consideration once again. We will consider them, and we need to do this. And then after voting, if we give the land to those locals, we should support those locals in terms of finance, circulating floating money, equipment, and definitely sales space. And believe me that on 2 or 10 to 10 hectares, people will not deal with corn. They will have a different agrarian policy, and then what we're going to have is the total change in the structure of agrarian aspect and agrarian production, including. That's why I'm deeply convinced, and that's what we're working towards in terms of the proposals for your legislative act, your draft law, that we should entrust the communities with access to all this, but we should also impose certain restrictions. There has been election to all the amalgamated territorial communities. But you know that normally those voted for were the farmer, the head of the agro holding, and somebody else. Why did they go there? If they have 3,000 hectares, well, they will care about their interests, how to take 20 more hectares if there are some land reserves still. So we should do it the way it is done in France, let's say, if you already have more than 200 hectares in the community. So provide somebody else with other lands. And on the other hand, I may tell you that young people coming in France to the lands, to some area, they will be given just 9 hectares for 3 years for them to show the result, and then they will enlarge the amount of hectares. So that's what we should. That's the regulation we should impose. And the quicker we are, the quicker we will come to an open discussion in terms of involving the money in Ukraine and providing people with the opportunity to launch their own businesses, family businesses, startups.
Thank you, Vadym. Maybe something else to be added to the above said, because I've got 2 aspects. Number one, yes, handing it over to one's management, even a state-owned land, to hand it over to the local community for management. It's not by 100%, but that will mean struggling with corruption. Will there be corruption? There will be, but if that comes to the community chair, then the prosecutor and the judge may be like a threat to them, because no one of them was even put to trial even once. And the second one, what is the size of the acreage of a farm that should be in Ukraine? Has somebody thought about that? How many? 100 hectares. Actually, the acreage, according to Peter Staliping, must be that big so as the financial profit might provide for the livelihood on the proper level to the farmer's family. And it could be 100 hectares in the central, west, and south. 50 hectares with the compulsory production of niche products, I mean berries, fruits, vegetables, and all the other things like milk and milk and meat, and there are multiple things. Any more questions? Lake Institute of Economy. My question is about the land shareholders' interests. We know the number 7 million, and they get 3%. My relatives half a year ago rescheduled and changed the agreement, so the valuation price 70,000 was, and it is 70,000. The only thing is within the percent for the interest, 2 to 3%. There was 2% and now 3%. Maybe the regulations would change so that the estimated value of land would change with the inflation or exchange rate, so that it automatically is reflected by the legislation according to a methodology with the average of 15% of inflation. Then the land value has doubled over the last 10 years, and even with a 2%, owners already got twice more. on the interest. So the question is, could that be taken into account depending on the inflation index? And the second question is related to the not only land market but actual agricultural markets. If you look into the prices inside Ukraine and stock exchange and grain exchange prices, Chicago and others, it's double price. So it looks like the internal farmers sell on internal prices, and those who buy it by their rules over there. So could the structure be changed so that it goes for the exchange, the grain exchange, so that the value is driven closer to the global value? Could that be changed? Because I know there's only 10% that is that's traded at exchanges, and that data is already outdated. That's the most fertile grounds, and in England they are not that fertile, and everyone sells from them at the commodity exchange. So could that be changed, something like regulation at a commodity exchange? Okay, there are more questions. Thank you for the question. Media's here. Vladimir Kulebaking, Uridovic Courier. My first question is for Mr. Ivchenko, and maybe someone else will make a contribution to my question too. They say that there is a political aspect to this land market issue, like that is a bad thing, so the purely political question, the situation with the property title is scary. Registration of those rights of those titles, anti-raiding measures are being taken every day. Nobody knows what to do next. And here we open the land market. There is one owner on one land plot and another one, and we don't know how they manage that, and there could be like fake owners, and it seems like they're gonna put up a fight and shoot each other, and then next day someone else like Vladimir will have another view on the land issue. And another one more question, another woman, and we're gonna close. It's very unfortunately, it is so interesting. Good afternoon, Olga, International Women's League for Freedom, and I like the attitude of the state towards the economy, towards the agriculture. But there is one thing they forgot, and they look to Europe, but in Europe, there's been more than 60 years of that agricultural joint policy within the EU, and it is a success because the budget allocated counts millions of euros, billions of euros. And another piece of policy is the development of agricultural areas, and there's another budget allocation for that too. And there was a forum the other week that presented the strategy of the Lugansk Oblast, and that forum had farmers as the floor, and they had created an association of farmers like cereal and grain producers, manufacturers, and every one of them had about 200 hectares of land. And one of them stood up and said, we have a problem not with money, we got money, but we have a problem with infrastructure, getting connected to the system and other things, and that's something that cannot be dealt with by the farmers on their own. And for money, that should be made scheduled, planned, and within the program of agricultural territories development. And we see that the Ministry of Agrarian Policy has to do something with that, because we got a ministry, we got no agrarian policy. So the question is, what most important changes to the legislation shall be made so that the state eventually engages in the development of agricultural areas? Road maps won't help. Nothing else won't help up until the time we have particular concrete budgets and concrete allocations and spendings on that budget. Thank you very much, but it's impossible to be covered completely. We only have 5 to 10 minutes. You may answer all the questions, the 3 ones that have just sounded, and then Dennis will say some exhortation words. Okay, rating, dear colleagues, so that you will all understand. Our deregulation proper has led the way to the registration as is registerers, the people. So the number one, we have allowed them the raiders to be registerers in the local communities, because they will grab a license for days and they will take the documents and they will doctor the data and they will change the owner. Now we're keep catching them because we had given them that right, and there are people that look strategically at their future and they cherish their high standing in society, reputation. But in most cases, those register the so-called land title. And number two, we adopted a law not to tamper with their activities. We created a ministry by the Ministry of Justice, and they cannot grab the originals of the documents that's written in the law. They can only get into that electronic register, digital register, and see what documents been given and see how well it was given. You know what? When we take the documents from the register, most of them are copies, not original documents, not original copies. You understand the system. Another system is courts. Courts make their rulings, issue their rulings, and when I go to trial, when I have a trial, then money will be foreclosed from that particular company. They will foreclose the premises, foreclose the harvest, and so on and so forth. Today, people, therefore, with that trading agreements have been remitted to slavery. You know why? Because other farmers come to me and they offer a different price, and I make an agreement with them, and they start trials and the commissions because I have the right of way. But I don't want, but after having consolidated more than 70%, I don't want to up my rental. What are you going to do to that? And the market that the government is proposing, every landowner buying the land, if I know that you won't get away, you will go to the one who rents it from you, and you won't get away with me, and I won't give him more than 3%. And the law says 3%, but there are private farmers from Chernobyl area, from Chernobyl Oblast, so that you understand, apart from interest paid, people get flour, people get wheat, grains, people get their kitchen gardens raked. And if you take it all together, it might make more than 15,000. But as was truly said, the person has the right. If somebody wants to grab their own business, give it to them, rent it out to them. And there are our colleagues trolling us with their political high speeches. Have they proposed the law on limited rental for one legal entity? No, they haven't. And those counterparts or colleagues I want to call by names. There was a letter to one European optimist. Do you know what they offered for the next year? That limitations be lifted of 150 million per pair of hands per capita. So today, 7 companies belonging to one person have grabbed 700 million. 7 companies, 700 millions. 7. So that you understand. You lift that limitation, they will grab it all. Number 3, subsidy. We're talking about state policy, and you said the right thing, that everyone should first go where they are needed, whatever is needed. And now about the egg farms. Why have they started to give raises to their salaries? Millions of biometric passports. 200,000 people have left the country in Chernobyl and Rivne Oblast. They freight buses, coaches that go to Poland for strawberries to work the strawberries, and the average salary is by much raised. And Vinnytsia Oblast, it's $500 per month leased, because that's a very good salary for them. And if you take those subsidies and divide it among the working farmers, growers, they will get like 100 euros per hectare. Thank you, Vadym. It's just to understand how we could make the diversification. Thank you very much. We have very little time, if possible. Maybe a couple. Just one more. Just to summarize and reflect on a number of things. Commodity exchanges were mentioned. There is 3480. That's a draft law on commodity exchanges. In certain segments of egg products, Ukraine has substantial positions on the world market. And the price should be made here, not at commodity exchanges, but here. And this is why the Securities Commission is working on that issue, and that's within its competence, and so is our competence on commodity exchanges. As to the mandates on land use, before 2013, the ag lands were at the disposal of Rayon State Administration. Now it's the cadastre. You know, in either of the places, in both places, there is a corruption. Only with decentralization, the corruption was decentralized at that time, so every chair was free to grab a piece of land. Now the corruption is centralized, and you know, I don't like corruption in any shape, but if you choose between the two evils, then better decentralized than centralized. Sorry to say that. That's the worst thought, actually. I don't want to develop it. But to answer this question, there's only one way. The privatization of 2 hectares should be suspended, and then there should be order that only competition and auctioning should take place, so it should be only paid for. It's either one's title to rent it out or one's title to own, and it goes centralized, it goes decentralized, and for decentralized, then we will see the corruption constituent going down in this area. And as to rating, very often, I would like to remind you, we got 4 million hectares privately owned of ag lands, and I'm a majoritarian MP, and I've got 2 rayons in Kiev Oblast, and very rarely I hear the situation when they come to enforcement on raiding and fraud on a few hectares. That very rarely happen, and when it does, there are institutes like law enforcement and other guys. Like it was directly stolen from you, it will take some time, but there will be justice, because most raiding is related to selling something. You are renting it out, and then there's a third party, and there's someone grew something on that land on sub-rental, and for example, somebody comes over and they see somebody else's harvest, and there comes the conflict. If the owner is the grower, there wouldn't be no conflicts related to with raiding, but that's for the way forward. So what can the state do? I don't know. I'm not a stickler of subsidies, though there are many in many countries. But for example, in the U.S., actually in the EU, it's subsidy-oriented mostly. In the U.S., there are minor subsidies, but what they have created is quasi-market conditions for purchase of land. And there's a special institution guaranteed by the government. There's long-term commitments, and they place their bonds for 20-25 years, and then via the bank network, credits are given to those who wants to buy, and that's pretty cheap financing because it's guaranteed by the government. And another aspect is agro insurance. That's a pretty risky, operatively speaking, business, weather-related. So also in our conditions and in other conditions, when you want to buy the land, there's a financial leverage, so-called. Then the state has helped to create a system of insurance, actually for revenues, not harvest-related, but income-related, revenues-related. And so they don't sell to insurances like, shall I insure for yield, shall I insure the price via commodity markets, commodity exchanges, and they created a product when revenues totally have been insured, and they give a subsidy to that insurance premium by 60%. They finance that, and that costs them about $10 billion per year. That's their scale. And the rental price regulation or lease price regulation, the law does not say that makes 3%. That's at least 3%. But let's ask the question, why is it always by 80, 90%, 3%? Because, and I will say that again, there is a monopoly of the tenant monopoly, and they dictate the conditions and terms. Thank you. Was interesting to hear. Thank you, Vadym. See you later. Bye-bye. Was very interesting to hear from you. Maybe not very pleasant to talk about corruption and raiding, but when we do, that will be the first step to highlight the problem, and that is struggle. And that's the first step to do the struggle. Maybe Mykhailo, 1 minute. Okay, I will explain number one about our legislation. And as Confucius once said, there are no bad laws, there are no good laws, there are executable laws, and there are non-executable laws. So therefore, whatever we do, unless the laws are not fulfilled, not carried out, or carried out the way one wants, the result will be known. Number two, all our agri-holdings initially in their inception created their farms far beyond what the law says, and today they have a clout in the parliament, thus legalizing their illegal activities. Number two, raiding. There is no raiding in Ukraine. Why? Because raiding is intellectual capture of property without breaking the law. It's not intellectual here. It's like banditism. That is punishable. Why is it flourishing? Because raiding cannot be without corruption, while we have those so-called umbrellas in uptown Lipki, where there are the MPs, where there are the ministers and the so-called dear friends, Ivchenkos, and it's only there where we have an umbrella, we have corruption, and down there is raiding, banditism, and whatever you do, banditism will always find its stickler covering that top, and we know them fairly well, and no law can protect us. Farmers starting from Kirovograd, Cherkasy, and now there's Poltava Oblast, and they set up armed forces, armed detachments to make the prosecutor understand they're not right, so that the city administration understands they're not right, so that all the others understand. And all the result, well, they have created those armed detachments. There is a reduction in banditism, in corruption, and all other things. In other words, all permissiveness will always bring about that bad condition. So, in my opinion, there should be decentralization, just to bring the official down, just to bring the briber down. Not every endeavor is expected to cover them all. At least partially, you can put up a fight like that, fighting the corruption. Thank you all very much. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you all very much. It was very interesting because our purpose was to do a rational, civilized discussion that I guess was made civilized. Thank you, therefore, very much. And the last couple words by Denis, because Denis has been working a long time on those issues, very much in a nutshell, Denis, and then we're going to close at 8. Thank you very much. Just a couple of words just to summarize. It seems like in the course of today's discussion, pretty interesting arguments were cited by everyone. We really, yes, have problems that might hamper our coming to the civilized market quickly, and we have mentioned both the creation of financing tools and improvement of the pricing tools, and also about decentralization, about the transparency and openness and higher competition rate. All those arguments are true, and in my opinion, there is another very good idea. So that's to overcome the implementation and related problems on all those activities, fortunately, all those activities, the problems, the problems emerge when it's to moved on according to a clearly cut roadmap that has to have the pure scheduling and timeframes and deadlines. Otherwise, we're going to procrastinate for another 10 years and another 10 years. So, in my opinion, the problem of the land reform and market opening could be only resolved if a clear time frame has been established up until what day then, be it December or January, is not crucial. Most importantly, we need those deadlines established, and according to the roadmap, there should be clear responsibilities determined for different kinds of levels of authorities, being central, local, and the parliament is expected to pass the key important acts of law. And in this case, if we join our efforts and we're going to move to a clearly cut goal, we're going to eventually see, be it January 1st, be it whatever month first, the open land market we're going to see and the prospects of developments for both the owners and growers, and we're going to see them implemented, executed, to make our land eventually to the source of growth and well-being for everyone we talked so much about. Thank you very much for the participation. Thank you, panel. Hopefully, we're going to continue the dialogue.